Good evening and welcome to our Church Militant special, Decade of Disorientation, mulling over the Francis Pontificate and beyond. I'm Michael Voris here with Brad Eli. Brad, this is the 10-year, Monday obviously was the 10-year anniversary. We're just doing things all week long and capping off with this. A decade of disorientation is probably a good way to approach this.
Confusing times. But at the same time, if you have a drunken sailor at the helm or even a malicious sailor at the helm, doesn't matter, the ship's not going down. We're going to find out. We've been through these waters, tumultuous times, many times in the history of the church. Most Catholics are completely oblivious to that.
Yeah.
They think this is the first go-around.
I think one of the things that's interesting here is, depending on sort of what, internet blogger or whatever you might be listening to, there are various ways that this kind of disastrous pontificate is approached. He's an anti-pope, he's an apostate, he's evil-minded, he wants to destroy the church. All of those kinds of things speak to an intention, which I think you have to be very, very careful. When our Lord's talking about don't judge, that's exactly the type of judging he's talking about. Not the actions, but the person's intentions. We've gone on here for years, 16, 17 years now, about when you have a corrupt hierarchy, a malformed hierarchy, what do you think is going to be produced? There's a fair argument to be made here that Francis thinks what he's doing is right and Christ-like and all of that, and what he keeps saying, but he emerged from this horrible, swamp, ecclesiastical swamp. It could very well be the case he's just malformed and actually believes all of this stuff. Not like he's going, hey, let's destroy the church. Although, it's certainly not helping the church by any stretch. But, you got to back off if you're immediately assigning intentions to him because you don't know.
Yeah, you really don't. And the problem is, too, you have a lot of partial statements here and there. Equivocations, ambiguities, lack of clarity, confusion. That's not the stuff of which convictions are made.
Right.
So the other thing is, he comes across a lot of people not as overly intellectual.
Right.
So, if you're going to pick an evil, manipulative old geezer to destroy the church, would you naturally tap someone who's not really got all the intellectual chops about it? But at the same time, we don't know. And at the same time, in a sense, Christ already foresaw this.
Sure.
He foresaw this when he's sleeping in the boat with the apostles.
Which he's taking a nap now.
It's time to wake up. Water's coming in,
wake
man.
up.
Yeah. So the fact is, Peter had his problems. St. Peter had his problems. All the hierarchy, Bishop Sheen had a great quote. He said, ecclesiality is scriptural. It's in the Garden of Gethsemane. And they all fled.
They all fled.
And that's what we see right now. So to hang all this on him, we're going to find out that when he goes, it's only just beginning. I mean, we still have layers upon layers. And I'm going to tell you, what they're saying about Francis, they were saying about John Paul II, saying about Paul VI, saying about all these, when's it going to stop? Yeah,
remember all the stories. Some Catholics may not know that there was this little crowd of people saying, oh, Pope Paul VI is an imposter. Or not him, but there's an imposter in there. They've kidnapped him, and these conspiracy theories start going crazy. And the overall effect they have, they never remove the Pope. They never get rid of cardinals or bishops. All it does is weaken the faith of those who have minimal faith to begin with.
That's a huge thing, too.
That's the big disaster.
Yeah.
Alrighty, in a few moments, we're going to be joined by Church Militant's very own Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomez. So stand by for that. He's in Rome, and he always has tremendous contacts and conversations and things there, so he's got some great insights for us. Catholics were shocked in February of 2013 when Pope Benedict XVI abruptly resigned the papacy, the first pope to do so in many centuries. Then, March 13th, just a little bit more than a month later, the Cardinals elected a dark horse, Jorge Bergoglio, as Benedict's successor. Surprising to many, Bergoglio was the runner-up at the 2005 conclave that elected Joseph Ratzinger to the papacy. At first, people weren't sure what to make of Bergoglio, the first Jesuit pope who took the name Francis after the poor man of Assisi. In July 2013, Francis gave the first, unfortunately, of many notorious in-flight press conferences. Being asked by a journalist about homosexuals in the priesthood, the pontiff uttered the now infamous phrase, "Who am I to judge?" After that, sodomy advocates claimed him as their champion. They don't really so much anymore. And the demonic specter of clerical sodomy emerged into the open. claiming validation from the successor of St. Peter.
For years, church militant chose not to publicly air any criticism of Pope Francis's oddball theological statements, erring on the side of caution. But in 2018, reports of gay clerical sex abuse exploded during the Summer of Shame, and everything changed. Then, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick was outed as a serial homosexual predator preying on boys, seminarians, priests. He was the most influential and high-profile cleric to be named, and it came to light soon after that Francis had contributed to covering up McCarrick's predation. That August, Church Militant aired this Vortex, calling for Pope Francis to resign.
You, Holy Father, as every Catholic must do when in a state of sin, should accuse and judge yourself guilty now, while you still have air in your lungs, and dispose of the wicked heretics and sodomites you have shamelessly collected around yourself so that they may never have a role in electing your successor. You are tearing the body of Christ apart by elevating the very men whose crimes cry out to heaven for vengeance, who never will stop because they have no supernatural faith. Your actions and omissions have left you unable to reign over the church in any meaningful way. You have no credibility, no moral authority, not a shred of decency left after having covered up one scandal after another until the day you go to your own grave.
Now, almost 5 years later, virtually nothing has been done by the Pope to identify and remove homosexual clerics.
Nobody can look at the state of the church in the last 10 years and say that things have gotten better. The smoke of Satan, as identified by Pope Paul VI, is billowing out of the Vatican, while the darkness and disorientation of Catholics has gotten worse. An hour is not nearly enough time to fully explore the confusion and difficulties that this pontificate has unleashed on Catholics and the world at large, but we're going to do our best to at least give you an authentically Catholic perspective. And I think this is one of the things, Brad, that we have to, continue to emphasize here, that, you got to stay on board. Father Chad Ripperger, he actually did a podcast, I think it was a day or two ago, saying you have to remain in the authority of the church. And that's a hint about all the people going off in the schismatic and sedevacantism and stuff. Bad popes are, what's that book, the pageantry?
Pageant of the Popes. Farrell wrote it in the 50s, and it covers all of the bad...
There's been like 3 dozen.
Oh, at least. I mean, it goes back to every problem all the way back to the beginning.
Right.
Of all the different scandals, you've had the mafia popes, they call them the black popes of the 900s, thousands. Bishop Schneider talked about those at length. We have all sorts of Medici popes and, all the baby popes and homosexual popes. What we didn't have in all those eras, the one thing, was the media. Putting the spotlight on, taking every half phrase, half sentence out of context, spinning it all over the world, finally find out, well, I didn't really mean that. I meant this and that and the other thing.
Yeah.
So we have...
You didn't have a Vatican press office
Hyperfocus.
in the 4th century to try to clarify.
Microscope on everything, right?
Yeah, it's very... and I do want to make one point. When I was in seminary, I had a wonderful professor by the name of Father Shelley, who's our church history professor. And he said to me when to all of us in class, I was in class, and he said, when you walk into St. Peter's, and for the first time, St. Peters Basilica in Rome, and you sort of fall down at the magnificence of it, when you pick yourself back up and kind of adjust yourself, just remind yourself that this beautiful basilica cost the church 1/3 of Europe. That was the kickoff, the indulgences that were being collected to pay for that, and every bishop and including the Pope was skimming their part off it and everything else. So yeah, you got a beautiful building, but you also kicked off the Reformation because of it.
Yeah.
So the idea that this is like some sort of unique thing, moral corruption, all of this stuff has been present in the church going back to near the beginning.
Money, the root of all evil.
That is exactly it. You're up.
There's been a seemingly non-stop series of scandals during this pontificate, roiling Catholics and even non-Catholics alike. Here to discuss some of these scandals today is our Rome-based Vaticanista, Jules Gomez. Hi, Jules.
Good evening, Brad. Good evening, Michael. It's great to be with you.
So, to get your analysis on things. And Jules, one of the most scandalous moments for many was the Vatican allowing the Pachamama worship to occur during the 2019 Amazon Synod. What's your take on that?
Well, the my take on that is that this is systemic. In fact, I told my Western friends that I was quite glad that it happened, because this sort of syncretism has become endemic in the church. Go to India, there are Pachamama right Hindu masses. I mean, I'm coining this term. And this was kind of, going on in seminaries, in convents, in churches. It was scandalizing the laity. It was turning people away from the church. It put a total break on evangelization. But finally, we see it in full bloom in the Vatican itself.
You know, that 2 points right there. Let's talk about scandal. Scandal's not just shocking someone. We always, I was scandalized. You wore that dress to the party. Well, scandal here is actually giving credence to a sinful attitude, a way of breaking the 10 Commandments here. And you're absolutely right. Scandalizing, leading people down this false worship, pagan idolatry, is a problem here. And I think what you said there about lack of the ability to evangelize. Now, for me personally, none of this really bothers my faith, but it really bothers me is I can't talk to other people about the faith because, well, the Pope's, pro-homosexual, or he's for all this, and all this nonsense, and it takes layers upon layers just to get past that scandal, to have a meaningful conversation with anybody about evangelizing. I think that's one of the greatest fallouts that we have right now, the ability to reach anybody on a spiritual, Catholic level, with the current confusing pontificate that we have.
Brad, you're absolutely right. My wife and I have spent years preaching the gospel to Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains. Now, when we try to do that today, even in Rome, to immigrants here, they turn around and tell us, well, but your Pope is saying that all religions are equally valid roads that lead to salvation. And so who are you to say Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through him? Now, I was covering the Amazon Synod, as you know, and there were very bizarre rituals conducted in various parts of Rome, and I went there, photographed, videoed them. I talked to people, priests, bishops, nuns, laity engaging in those rituals, and I asked them the origins of these rituals, and without batting an eyelid, they told me that, well, you see, these are pagan rituals, these are rituals performed by shamans, for example, but we are all inclusive today. There's a different model of the church, and you need to come on board.
I think if I can jump in here for a second, Jules, I was obviously in Rome also with the crew for Pachamama, and I thought one of the things that was interesting, we covered it while we were there, but there were sort of much larger issues, but we did touch on the fact that all over Rome, particularly around the Vatican, obviously, that whole month of Pachamama, October 2019, there were tons of people from the Amazon, native Amazonians who were there, and I was asking a couple of them, like, if this is the world's poor and all of this, how did you all get here? I mean, it's a pretty expensive flight, from South America to Rome, and where are you staying and how are you eating? I mean, we had obviously Church Militant knows about that because we have to pay our own bills when we go to Rome. So I was like, how is all this happening? Everybody hears because again, what was it all sold on? It was the poor Amazonians, their climate change is destroying, their lives, and that was kind of the push for all of it. And I was really struck by the fact that, you guys are staying in some pretty nice hotels here in Rome, and they all seem to be eating some nice food. And you saw these people up and down in the restaurants, and there were at least a few hundred of them. I mean, who footed the bill for all of that? So it looked to me, it's my little investigative journalist hat on. It looked to me like these guys were all brought in as sort of props, like PR props to, and they get, many of them have sort of the feathers and the native dress and all that. I mean, you couldn't miss them. And they were walking around everywhere and holding their signs and everything. So it was extremely, the whole thing looked staged to sort of drive home a point. And these guys were doing interviews. They had their own media team set up by some crazy nun who was working in conjunction with the Amazon Synod. And it was the whole thing was weird. It was weird. I mean, I've been around the corporate America a lot. I know what a press conference and the sideshow and the hype looks like, and that's what this looked like.
Michael, the impact, if I may say so, was devastating in the Amazonian regions, because I talked to a number of people in Brazil, for example, just one example, and they were telling me how virtually millions are leaving the Catholic Church there and joining evangelical and Pentecostal sects. Now, this whole Pachamama drama played out powerfully in the Latin American media, and that did not help the cause of evangelization in the Catholic Church at all. In fact, evangelicals and Pentecostals were running with it and saying, "See, we told you so."
Jules, we're going to switch gears for just a second. Talk to us about the destruction, more or less, the moral destruction of the John Paul II Pontifical Academy, with all the pro-contraceptive, pro-euthanasia, pro-abortion folks being brought into that academy, and all the good people being jettisoned from there.
Well, that has been a very big scandal of this pontificate, because it almost seems deliberate attempt to weed out the conservatives, or faithful Catholics, if I can use the term, and to bring in people who will, in the words of Vatican speak, rely on new sources of knowledge, the most recent developments in the scientific world, and help us think through Catholic moral theology in a way that is suitable for the 21st century. So if that is the goal that they have put forward before us, it's perfectly okay to jettison the apostolic deposit and go with what's trendy, but to them, of course, go with what's scientific, the signs of the times.
Yeah, Jules, this has a little bit of a feel to it that, when Vatican II began, one of the things that was off the table for discussion at the council was the question of birth control. Artificial birth control was kind of deliberately left out because Pope John the 23rd had started a commission talking about not really birth control per se, but the United Nations report at the time that said, hey, there's too much the world population, blah, 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 all that stuff. When Pope John died and Pope Paul took over, he expanded the commission to deliberately include people who were opposed to the church's teaching on contraception, birth control, on purpose, so that he could sort of say, okay, give me your best shot. We're going to, everything you need to say, that you said church is wrong on this, that, and the other. And still, he produced Humanae Vitae 3 years after the commission wrapped up its work, but still. It doesn't feel like that this time. It just feels like, hey, let's open up, let's have our worldview, and da-da-da-da-da. It's disturbing, is, probably the mildest way you can say it.
Well, the most destructive work has taken place, commentators would say, in the Pontifical Academy for Life, where there's been the most intentional effort to bring in people who are what one might call depopulationists. And the best example that, took reams and reams of newsprint in the secular media as well was the appointment of the Italian-American economist Mariana Mazzucato, who's not only an atheist, but pro-abortion. Michael, we've gone miles beyond contraception. We are now talking about people who are pro the murder of unborn babies. I mean, what more can I say?
Yeah, it's really strange when you think about on the one hand, all of the stuff is going on under his watch, and on the other hand, he's talking about kind of demographic winters. And it makes you, does he understand? I mean, that's part of the thing here, as Brad said in his opening comments, there's this weirdness, like he speaks in confusing, vague, sometimes contradictory terms. So it is kind of, does he really understand, what's going on his watch? Do they just assume that he has his blessing and, he's the pro-gay pope, and yet he comes out constantly and says all of that stuff is demonic. So it's like, well, which is it? And I think this is the great point of confusion. He's saying one thing, he's doing another, or he's allowing stuff to happen or whatever. So I know Brad's got, and we're going to wrap up here, but Brad's got one more point to ask you about.
Well, Jules, then there's the shocking case of Father Ivan Rupnik. Jules, you have been covering this extensively from Rome.
Brad, Father Michael Ivan Rupnik, over 3 decades, abused over 25 nuns and lay women, sexually, psychologically, physically. It's one of the most disgusting things I've ever had to write. I've now written my 16th story. But what is, the epitome of scandal here is the fact that he was excommunicated for offering sacramental absolution to a sexual accomplice, but then rehabilitated within a month by the express orders of the Holy See. And he is a very close friend of Pope Francis. And despite the media repeatedly taking up the story, almost every week there is something new and even more disgusting about the Jesuit abuser, celebrity artist Rupnik. He still, last week, he celebrated a mass at one of the most ancient and most historic and most sacred churches next to St. John the Lateran. So people are just, this is jaw-dropping beyond, and of course the Francis cheerleaders are silent, and particularly as we celebrate the 10th anniversary, this has really become the biggest stain because the timing is so significant, and on social media people constantly respond with just one word, Rupnik.
So much for zero tolerance coming out of the Vatican.
Yeah, it's quite bad. Jules, thank you very much for joining us with your insights, and keep up. So everybody knows, Jules is in virtually every evening newscast here at Church Militant with insights there from on the ground right in Rome. Jules, thanks very much for joining us. God bless, brother.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, another huge problem with this pontificate is how Pope Francis has placed wicked prelates with obviously no supernatural faith in positions of power in both the Vatican and chanceries around the world. This is a big deal because this sets the superstructure in place, or reinforces what was already a bad one that we've been reporting on long before anybody ever heard the name Francis. And it just reinforces it, it concretizes it.
Okay, guys like Zenchetta and Penapera and all the way back into Argentina when he, in Buenos Aires with Grassi, people who have been following our reporting know all these names, putting compromised individuals in. Now, this is where you might start to get the conspiracy theory and start to impart motive and stuff. Let's just draw a hypothetical. If you were more of a dictatorial type person, if you wanted to have a little heavy-handedness in the Vatican, if you wanted to have more control over the situation, would you not amalgamate to yourself compromised individuals who one day could do your bidding, and if not, the next day you could throw them under the bus, and everybody would be like, yeah, they should have been under the bus. Why'd you have me here anyway?
Right.
And that's, either him or somebody else giving him great advice to say, hey, why don't you bring these type of people in there?
Yeah.
One way or the other, they can say, move all this money on the London deal. Well, that's actually legal. I can't do that. Well, you want to go to jail tomorrow or what? Yeah, that's you can't totally go there. But man, that starts getting the wheels moving. Why else would you get all of these known, compromised, broken individuals who clearly have a rap sheet a mile, longer than your arm, in positions of such great authority, like billions of dollars of Holy See patrimony?
Yeah, we've done a report. We call her Kay. Christine Christley here on staff did a great report called Den of Thieves, where he talked about money laundering. By the billions, back and forth, between the Patriarchate of Jerusalem and the Vatican, and some folks in Southern California, billions and billions of dollars shifting around. When you're looking at all of this, you're saying, well, somebody like Kevin Farrell, for example, Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who was Bishop of Dallas.
Roommates with McCarrick.
Roommates
was
with
shocked
McCarrick for
because
7 years. Roommates are, a so close associate of, Maciel,
Right.
who raped, and the funny, I know nothing about that.
I'm shocked.
I know nothing about, the Maciel, and then all of a sudden McCarrick happens, and he's like, oh, I'm shocked. It's like, dude, you lived with for years.
You must have been like Mr. Magoo, you walk in your own little air bubble, right? Nothing
You have
phases
got
you.
to be either the biggest liar or the biggest doofus. Of a cardinal that has ever lived
Right.
in 2,000 years.
And you don't get to be positions where he's at by being a doofus.
No,
so.
you don't. So, but here he is now. He's Camerlengo, and
Which is a big deal
Yeah,
because
when-
he's the guy that says Pope Francis is going to die.
right when Francis dies or is no longer Pope, resigns or whatever, Kevin Farrell has temporary until the conclave elects a new Pope, has temporary control of the operations of the church. The man is compromised as can be.
Oh, yeah. And then you look at the problem with, okay, what happens if World War III broke out about that time? What happens if, you can't just fly anywhere you want at the time? Supply chains and all this stuff come down. How long is that going to go on? We've had in the history of the church, maybe, I don't know, at least 2 years or more, a period of time where they couldn't have a conclave.
Yeah. Well, matter of fact, there was one conclave that went on for over 3 years.
Okay.
It's 3 years, and
So-
he's never elected a Pope. So what's going on in the church when that's happening?
Farrell.
Yeah, Farrell's the dude. He's like fill-in Pope. I'm not saying any of this is going to happen. We're just obviously we have no idea if it's going to or not. But look, we've seen air traffic come to a halt like that. If you have to have all the cardinals there, to have the conclave, or at least all the voting age ones that are there, it's all of these kinds of things. You gotta. It's like, what is going on? And I want to go back to a point that I had brought up earlier, the idea that all of this is kind of, oh, look at Francis. Okay, I want to abolish that idea.
Right.
Francis is the product
Right.
of something that has gone on in the church for more than a century.
Yeah.
And people don't really want to understand. They don't want to look at it. They want to blame it, because it's this narrow view of Pope Francis. We're going to talk a little bit later in the show about, what about the next Pope? Are all the people who are like, oh, he's an apostate, he's an anti-pope, he's a heretic, he's a this, he's a that, he's the devil wearing white. Well, dudes, what do you think's going to happen when the next Pope steps out on the balcony?
Just to take that point without going farther into the future, when Jules was talking about, he's trying to get clarity on Pachamama.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, Francis is not just the only guy who's not speaking clarity on these issues. Francis exists inside of a whole mechanism right now, which is not speaking clarity on these issues.
Right.
Any single one of those guys could actually put on his mitre and pick up his crozier and start speaking truth about, well, Pachamama is actually idolatry. We shouldn't be doing that. That's actually sinful, wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
It doesn't have to come from
we
the
got it
Pope.
wrong.
It's nice if it comes from the Pope, but it doesn't have to come from the Pope.
Right.
Where are all the bishops saying
Is the
this?
Pope the only one to have a mouthpiece there?
I think this is one of the things that that really irritates me about and faithful Catholics should be irritated by it, about the sort of the clickbaity mad rad trad media on the one side, like Francis, and then the other side, the Catholic establishment media saying, oh, isn't Francis nice? And he petted some doggy on the head, and isn't he a nice Pope and all that. Neither of those sides ever talks and goes into detail about the pool of the hierarchy from which this stuff emerges.
Yeah.
John Paul left Rome because the Curia was so corrupt he couldn't get anything done. So, this is 100 years this has been going on. It's just the latest iteration. I think the case could be made it's probably the worst so far. But, for all these people who are going on, I mean, is the Catholic establishment media, like National Catholic Report, or not Reporter, whatever.
Distorter.
Distorter. The other one.
Oh, the Register.
National Catholic Register, EWTN, are all these guys just going to continue to ignore what's going on the ground? It's fine for EWTN to sit there and have their little papal posse and get click, 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 and people watching as they rag on Francis, as though Francis is like the answer to all of this.
The only source of problems.
Francis is the product of something that's been going on for a century.
They elected him, so they're all simpatico. That particular thing, no one wants to do everybody wants to say, okay, restore the Latin Mass, condemn Vatican II, and replace Francis, and everything will be fine in the church. What about all the McCarricks? What about all the Farrells? What about all these other creepy crawlies that are just and all the lukewarm fence sitters out there who won't speak on transgender. Dolan, for instance, in New York.
Right.
But what about well, why don't you ask the Protestants? They'll talk more about transgender.
Cardinal Dolan is the one who cut a backroom deal with then Governor Cuomo to get funding from Albany for Catholic schools in exchange for introducing the whole gay marriage thing, and that's what it was, even though he lied about it initially and said, "Oh, they're just Catholics who are gay." No, they're not. Out Universal at NBC was specifically promoting gay marriage before Obergefell, a few months before. And it was on their website. One click, and you went straight to it. The whole thing of marriage equality, blah, blah, love wins. It was all right there. And he pushed them into the parade.
Right.
He's the one that opened the door. We found out after the parade. He was kind of pleading a little bit of ignorance beforehand. But just to pick one example, New York's kind of the cultural mecca capital of all of the media and everything else in the world. There's a cardinal sitting there right now who's crooked as hell. He covered up the Peter McClelly thing and all of that, all the priests. This thing, and we've reported on all of this, all of it. The reason we report on it is because that is the root cause. Pope Francis is not the root cause. He's just the easy clickbait headline.
From there will come the next pope. From that group will come the next pope.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I read all the stuff 30 years ago. They were saying the exact same thing about John Paul II. If we can just replace John Paul II, we'll get a pope that puts the Latin Mass on there, condemns Vatican II, and everything will be fine in the church. And it just keeps going on. So you're not going to have a solution until you start getting a magisterium that's actually going to be teaching the families. This is okay. Teaching the families to be holy, to have holy vocations to send to seminaries, and the seminaries are going to not abuse them,
right,
or malform them, and actually form them in Catholic, so they can go on up the ranks, and then you're going to start to cycle through and actually have a good hierarchy again.
Let's bring up a point using the Latin Mass under John Paul and Pope Benedict. John Paul, to show you how entrenched the opposition is to faithful, authentic Catholicism in the hierarchy. John Paul had said a couple of times, I think it was at least two, and I think it was a third, I may be wrong on the third, document that he issued, and he said, bishops around the world, you have to be generous to the people who want to be able to have a Latin Mass, and that this is their, it's reverent for them, and all of that stuff, all the good things about the Latin Mass. Good. He published one document, they completely ignored it.
Right.
I mean, it's the Pope telling the bishops, do this. They're like, screw that.
Or encyclical.
And then he writes another one. They're like, screw that. That's the reason Summorum Pontificum came out from Benedict. And he said in the letter that went along with it, essentially, because you bishops around the world have ignored this, I'm now giving priests permission to say the Latin Mass without your permission.
And if you have a problem with that, come and see the Vatican. We'll clarify that for you.
It's so John Paul runs into this. Benedict runs into this. And Latin Mass is a perfect example of it. Look at the machinations they had to go through to walk around what is essentially a corrupt or indifferent or unbelieving hierarchy.
Right.
So the problem is the hierarchy. They do not believe the faith, or they don't have the strength to promote the faith, and they have all kinds of little kiss butts around them that support them in that.
Father Pablo
it is not the Pope. It doesn't matter if it's Francis or John Paul. It doesn't matter. Stop talking about the symptom of the problem and talk about the actual root problem.
Father Pablo Straub, in one word, what was he saying? What was his statement?
It's those bishops.
Holy little Father Pablo Straub.
Holy little Father Pablo Straub. He said that to me years ago in my living room. Another problem to consider is, as we've talked about, the next conclave. In February, Catholic journalist Ed Penton, good friend of ours here, published an interview he did with Monsignor Nicola Books, who was a consultant for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. He noted, quote, certainly half the cardinal electors and many bishops are convinced we cannot go on this way, and change is needed to put the church in order if she is to remain Catholic. Good point. There is turmoil in the College of Cardinals, as there is among the priests. The ecclesial body is waking up from a state of anesthesia. But Pope Francis has been busy cranking out the red hats. The College of Cardinals, as it now stands, look at this, has 83 of the members have been put there in place by Pope Francis, 38 put in by Pope Benedict XVI, and 11 by Pope John Paul II, with a few of them about to age out, Pope John Paul's. Going back to Ed Penton's interview with Monsignor Books, the Monsignor went on to say, one cannot imagine how a new pontiff will be able to rely on the current hierarchy, the very point we've just been making, and curia, or on all those who have roles in church structures. Think only of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. That will not be easily changed any time soon.
In March 2022, a memorandum was circulated among the Cardinals, published under the pen name Deimos. After the death of Australian Cardinal George Pell, it was revealed he was Deimos. The letter is important because Pell was a close collaborator with Pope Francis as a member of his Council of Cardinal Advisors, those 9 groups, a gang of 9, until he was sidelined by bogus sex abuse claims. The letter begins with this bombshell quote: "Commentators of every school, if for different reasons, with the possible exception of Father Spadaro, agree that this pontificate is a disaster, in many or most respects, a catastrophe," end quote. And doesn't let up for a moment, but it makes important points about what the next pope will face. It's on to say the College of Cardinals has been weakened by eccentric nominations. Many cardinals are unknown to one another, adding a new dimension of unpredictability to the next conclave. The new pope must understand that the secret of Christian and Catholic vitality comes from fidelity to the teachings of Christ and Catholic practices. The first tasks of the new pope will be to restore normality, restore doctrinal clarity in faith and morals, restore a proper respect for law, and ensure that the first criterion for the nomination of bishops is acceptance of the apostolic tradition. Really, you needed to say that? That tells you everything about the time.
The very fact that you have to
opposite all the way. Deimos,
Yeah.
God bless you, Cardinal. Pell, posthumous, rest his soul, and please pray for him. There's going to be 3 scenarios facing the church. One, we already alluded to. What happens if Farrell, for an extended period of time, as Camerlengo is running things, because you have such a breakdown? You look at the Ukraine, you look at Iran and Israel, you look at North Korea popping a nuke, China, my goodness, Taiwan, COVID, who knows, right?
Yeah.
And the world shuts down. Who'd have thought all Catholic masses shut down? I mean, who'd have thought that?
Yeah, I mean, if that's on the table, more than on the table, that was the table.
Happened, blackout.
If that happens, hey, anything can happen.
Okay, so that's a scenario that could be an extended period of time without a pope. And that's not without precedent in the church. You said like 3 years between conclaves. Number 2, books and demos have their say. People hear what they have to say. And they actually overcome the hubris or the block of the Gallon Mafia 2.0, right?
Right.
And they actually elect somebody because of Catholic principles here. This is a good type of canvassing, by the way.
Sure.
Saying elect a Catholic for a pope next time. Okay, not that this one's not, but you know what? So that's number 2. But what he's going to have to deal with,
Yeah, he's got to fight that.
he's got to fight all the bishops.
He's got to fight the church swamp.
Or you elect a Francis 2.0 who just continues on, exacerbating the whole swamp.
Yeah.
So you got one of the 3. Which one are you going to take?
There are no other options. That's it. You're going to get somebody who's in there as reform-minded, and he has to run into that. Now, if you do get a good reform-minded guy in, and he says, "That's it. I'm going to dislodge," because I get this. I've been sitting very quietly on my little island over there where there's only 7 people. Only 3 of them are Catholic, and the Pope made me a cardinal.
Isle of Man.
So I've just been sitting there very, very quietly observing everything, and this is the guy the Holy Spirit is going to touch, and he goes in there and he starts executions of the Curia.
If he doesn't get executed himself.
In St. Peter's Square. He better do that the first day.
Right.
Maybe somebody like that gets elected. I mean, the church has always pulled out of these things. That's the point, because it's led and protected by the Holy Spirit. Although it does, as we said in the beginning, it does seem our Blessed Lord takes naps every now and then.
Yeah. Someone give him the cue right there.
Oh, but I think that's interesting to observe on a parallel. We're always drawing the parallels, because what happens in the church spills over into the world.
Oh, absolutely.
So, in a sense, look, this has been going on for 100 years. All the corruption in D.C.,
they're all product of that.
All that whole thing, when you just call it the swamp, just to use Trump's term, and everybody knows what we mean by that. Well, the same type of thing. Is it not good that, like Trump came and exposed everything, and we begin to see it more and more, and the kind of waking to the wokeness sort of thing has happened on the political scene and the cultural scene. Not enough yet, but it's certainly trending that way. I'd like to posit that I think it's a good thing that there is an element of good in the fact that Francis is there and all of this has surfaced in the church. Before Pope Francis, we go, why wasn't this happening? And why isn't that happening? And, why is this cardinal allowed to do that? And why is this bishop? And, all the liturgical abuses and nothing ever changes. You have to begin to understand the large picture. That's one of the things we do here at Church Milton. We show people the large picture. Had Francis not been elected, and you get some other kind of, librarian pope or, studious theologian or something like that. And it's not a knock on any of those skills, but it's not what's needed now. What's needed now is the dude with the flamethrower.
And Brogan boots.
So if you get another, studious, holy, pious pope there, and everybody's like, oh, Holy Father, and all the bishops are kissing his ring and doing this stuff, and then scooting back to their diocese and still malforming seminarians, where does the problem ever end?
Right.
Somehow the depth of the abyss of evil that is present in the hierarchy that we've been pounding on for 15 years needs to be surfaced. And if you didn't have the Francis pontificate, I don't know that you would have.
No.
You wouldn't have. There's just too many Catholics who don't want to accept that their bishop is a crook, or gay, or thief, or all of the above, or a coward. They're like, oh, is this? There's this kind of like misplaced piety, with regard to the leaders of the church. And now you have to sit up and pay attention, even though still enough aren't, like with the deep state stuff on the political and cultural side. But the trend is much more there. People hear things. I know because we get the emails, I get the text, you get the phone call. Everybody here, we got 50, whatever it is, people here deal with this every day. And the amount of calls and letters and emails and texts and everything else keeps increasing because of all of this. So people are like, what's going on? It's a bad way to get to that conclusion, but it's good that conclusion has been arrived at by people. Like, something's seriously wrong in the church, and it ain't just Francis.
Well, we'll go back to the Summer of Shame, 2018. We already had this kind of sense of relief, in a sense, because the mystical body was sick. It had a wound, or many wounds, and a lot of times there's only one way to heal that wound is to lance it and let all of that awful come out.
It's gross, but
okay?
you got to do it.
And it was gross, and we didn't even report a tenth of the amount of grossness of all that. There was so many stories we could report in 2018, and we did. Now we have more of that with the financial, and then one way with the media hyper-focusing on everything, you get really up close to those wounds, very, very closely, okay?
Get the stench in your nose.
And let's take a 30,000-foot view. 1917, Our Lady of Fatima, communism and all that, and how it would affect, it spread its errors, right? And now we find a lot of the pulpits are co-opted and that type of thing. 1922, the word is Stalin sending people into the seminaries. Okay, there was a decree by him and he saw this as a political thing. That's a political entity, and we need to take it out. About that time, you start to see all this festering grow at a rapid rate. A lot of that was left over from the Enlightenment era. The French Revolution. Everyone wants to be hip, and all this modern evolution stuff. Teilhard de Chardin and these other crazies are running around. And Jesuits are always going off the rails. They need to be corrected, for centuries that's been going on.
Suppressed and disbanded would be the thing.
2018, Summer of Shame, started to lance it, started to see a lot of this stuff coming out. The 2018 was 100 years after Fatima, Yeah. So 2017, when all the consecrations happened, then 2018, all this lancing started, right?
Well,
what happens if none of that happened?
I'd do you on going back even further. 10 years before Our Lady appears at Fatima, Pope St. Pius X is issuing his encyclical against modernism.
Right.
For the decay and the rot to rise to the level of needing an official response from the Pope himself means that decay and that rot is well in place.
Who said, I didn't kill it, it went underground, we're going to have to deal with this, and it's going to keep festering. He himself said that.
Right.
So we're actually, all this is a product.
We're going back to the 19th century of all of this stuff happening. And when you have a corrupt hierarchy and a malformed hierarchy, and let's face it, I mean, there's a number of stories that we know, information that we know that we can't share directly because our sources of this information, these various data points, would be completely exposed and they'd be attacked. That's one of the reasons we have to sometimes just say we know and we can't say anything further about who. But what we do know is that there are you need to understand the word no. Certitude. We know that there are members of the Curia and members of the American hierarchy who reject the deposit of faith. We know it for a fact. We can't say how we know it. And it's not just some supposition. It's kind of obvious when you look around, so it shouldn't be so like, oh my gosh. But when you're confronted with that reality of like, oh my gosh. So, this one has said among other people, there is no deposit of faith.
Right.
The deposit of faith doesn't exist.
But knowing that point makes a lot of things make sense.
Sure does.
That's why you're talking this way, because you don't have supernatural faith, do you?
You don't believe the church as she is divinely constituted. You believe the church as a political or bureaucratic or institutional thing, and that's it. I mean, there are those aspects to it, obviously. It's on earth in time, administered by humans. But the divine protection and the divine mission and charter of the church, they completely reject.
Well, you were in the seminary, I was in the seminary. We get the same feel. I mean, you had Schmitty, Monsignor Smith, right?
Yeah.
God bless him.
And
there was a few good priests, but few and far between.
Yep.
And this was the thing, pastoral this, take your shoes off, you're standing on holy ground and all. There's no deposit of faith being taught.
Right.
It was all this sociology, psychology, replacing faith and morals.
Absolutely.
That's been going on for decades. The product of those seminaries go on up and wear red hats and purple hats, and they start, ordaining men, and they start passing this on. The other problem...
For people sitting at home, Brad, on this one, I think it's important to remember, not all these guys go on to be bishops and things. Some of them just remain your pastors.
Right.
They don't have either the skill set or they ticked off some gay lover in seminary, so they never advance or their name never gets submitted for bishop. But they're still there. They're sitting in confession, hitting on, young guys who come in and talk about, confess some sexual sins. They're the ones sitting there saying, no, get up, you can't receive Holy Communion kneeling down. This is systemic. Throughout the system, some of these horrible men have risen to high ranks in the church, but there are many more of these guys sitting in parishes all over the country, all over the world, but particularly the Western world. You got to bear that in mind. Stop concentrating on the most obvious thing. Pope Francis this, Pope Francis the other. It isn't just Francis. There is an entire network, an entire machine that, whether he says this stuff or not, is still propagating it. That's the point. He just happened to emerge from it. But you could have St. John Paul in there, and the machinery keeps going. That's the problem.
Yeah, Paul VI personally didn't like communion in the hand. We know that's on record. Right. He's saying, hey, you guys need to stop communion in the hand. They're like, oh, we can't stop it. It's going on everywhere. Okay. Well, we already voted on it, and they all say you shouldn't have that out there. Well, we're going to... So trying to buck the bishops is a difficult thing. John Paul II had a problem. Benedict had a problem. Everybody has a problem. How do you think a new guy's going to come in, with 6-shooter shooting and just say, hey, I'm going to clear...
Sam.
I'm just going to clean...
to this side of the Tiber.
So you're on the ark. You're on the ark. Got a bunch of drunken sailors on here. A lot of good sailors, too. A lot of people confused, okay? But you're on an ark that won't sink.
Right.
You're saying...
Unlike the Titanic, this ship cannot sink.
I think it's going to sink. Therefore, I'm going to jump over into the Protestant waters off the right or the left of this boat and have sudden death, sure death.
Do I want to jump on this side and look at the heretical waters, or I want to go over on that side and look at the schismatic waters?
And it doesn't matter. Both sides you're in the water. So how are you better than if you stayed on the... And even if it did sink, which it can't sink.
It can't sink. It can't sink because who built it?
Exactly.
We've given this quote by St. John Eudes in several other productions, and it deserves to be continuously repeated. Here it is. The most evident mark of God's anger and the most terrible castigation he can inflict upon the world are manifested when he permits his people to fall into the hands of clerics who are priests more in name than in deed, priests who practice the cruelty of ravening wolves rather than the charity and affection of devoted shepherds. When God permits such things, it is a very positive proof that he is thoroughly angry with his people and is visiting his most dreadful anger upon them. That is why he cries unceasingly to Christians, "Return, O ye revolting children, and I will give you pastors according to my own heart." Right now, as we've made the analogy a few times, our blessed Lord is asleep while the bark of Peter is being tossed about and seems to be in danger of sinking. Let's underline the point again. This ship cannot sink. This is not the only time. We've witnessed horrible events and everything in the history of the church. A schism 1,000 years ago at the East, which, by the way, the reason schisms are so dangerous is because they never heal. Schisms never heal. A mindset develops on the part of those who are the schismatics, and they refuse. Their entire foundation is what? The entire foundation of schism is that something's gone horribly wrong in the church, and we are the church.
Right.
You can't. That's your foundation. When you do that, you're gone.
A false messiah.
That's why the Orthodox are still the case.
But John Eudes, it's a great point to dwell on for a minute. John Eudes says we're getting the shepherds we deserve. Let's roll back to 1968, 69. Now, they had that commission on Humanae Vitae, before Humanae Vitae. It was on the birth control pill because it just scientifically came out possible in, 60, 61. They said, hey, let's study all this.
There's a philosophical question. Before you didn't used to be able to practice birth control, there was always something you introduced into the blocking thing. Well, this was, what if you just use the natural methods? That's why artificial birth control is that adjective sitting in front of it.
Right.
That you artificially manipulate the reproductive system of women with the pill. And so if something isn't happening that would happen, is that okay? That was kind of the philosophical question, and it only came up because science, under Margaret Sanger and Dr. Rock, who's Catholic, invented the pill. And it was like, oh, this is an entirely different new way to prevent conception. It's a scientific way which goes into the body and screws things around in the body. So what about this one? That was what the point of the commission was.
Several years of a commission. Every time the commission was saying, well,
rigged, by the way, the commission was rigged.
Right, and it was also, I remember back then, very little about that, but it was still coming out in the media.
Yeah.
That the commission was like, oh, we think it's okay. We think, it's going to tip to the hat. We're going to probably do the nip, tip, and nod. So this is probably where it's going. And in the mind of the Catholics, oh, it's a question. They're deciding it. It must be not really bad. We could probably do this.
Lots of people, I'm sure many of our older viewers will remember that's what was being told to them in confession.
They're going to change this.
They're going to change this. I know you're using it because at that time Catholics are actually confessing. Hey, we used whatever birth control and some method of birth control. And the priest is like, okay, absolve you. Yeah, you're absolved. But just Rome's going to change all this.
And that went on so hard that by
3 years,
1968, Humanae Vitae rolls out. And there was this hubris against it.
Right.
Bishops, priests protesting against it, laity. And then you start looking at the numbers. 7 out of 10 Catholic couples, 8 out of 10 Catholic couples are practicing contraception, 9 out of 10.
Yep.
So they're starting to say, we don't need to listen to that.
Right.
Okay. And the Pope, Paul VI, is saying, hey, this isn't me. I'm just passing on teaching. This is just a standard teaching for 2,000 years.
The blowback that he experienced was, that was 10 years before he died. And he'd written a number of encyclicals, good encyclicals, prior to Humanae Vitae, a good encyclical also. After that, he never wrote another encyclical.
What's the point?
He was so shell-shocked at the flamethrower blowback he got from bishops. The church in Canada, the hierarchy in Canada with their Winnipeg statement essentially apostatized and said, screw you, we don't have to listen to Rome. While it wasn't actually enunciated like that here in the United States, that was the attitude, certainly, and remains the attitude.
So you go back to John Eudes, we get the shepherds we deserve. By 8, 9, 10 lay Catholics, and a whole host of formed, you go to, the seminary in Buffalo, Christ the King.
Now closed.
Okay, and they're teaching this. You get, Skillebecks and these crazies, who was the guy? Curran, right?
Yeah, in D.C.
Going around and giving seminars on all this, how you can actually sin and still go to heaven. That was the big thing, all the ex-priests writing books on how you can sin and go to heaven. Because if the church is wrong on Humanae Vitae, which we all think they're good, and then the church's moral authority.
All right.
There was a Damian Thompson comes out with a good looking back 10-year anniversary of Francis. Mm-hmm. The last line, will the papal authority ever recover? Well, papal authority's been under attack since Humanae Vitae, okay, number one. Number two, it's probably going to take a divine reset. We all hear about, World Economic Forum and the Great Reset.
Our Lord has his own version of a Great Reset.
Okay, there's a divine reset.
You can push the button.
Read our improved apparition, Our Lady of Akita, okay, just for, and that miracle of the sun, you got something crashing down. Was that a forerunner of that? So this idea that you're going to have nuclear war, heck, every day in the news you go, that meteorite's coming in, but don't worry, it's going to miss us. Oh, this one's coming in, don't worry, that one hit us, but that one just hit the moon. So we're not so set down here that something can't really tilt this world in a big way.
Sure.
And, you start looking around the world again, and everybody's starting to talk about hypersonic missiles and nuclear this and all that, and we're like, oh, no one would do that, would they? Really? And next thing you know, the whole world could be, the first purification came by water. They say the second one will be by fire because St. Peter talks about that in his epistle. So never despair that God is going to leave his church, but the correction may be a little more than you want to encompass here, and we'd like to do it but Catholics were so easy to point at the hierarchy. John Hughes, we get the shepherds. You're not going to listen to the Pope. Okay, I'll get you a Pope that will tickle your fancies, so much so that you don't want to be tickled anymore.
Right.
That you're just begging for a little clarity. Even the lax people out there, would you just speak some truth out there?
Yeah.
You tell me I don't...
Say what you mean.
Yeah. So this idea that God will leave his church abandoned, that he won't correct things, it will. But remember, around the 1200s, the bubonic plague going through.
Sure.
Okay. Wiped out
a third of the church.
Okay. So that type of thing, there's a precedence for. And when that type of thing happens, we all get kind of down to, no longer the Tower of Babel anymore. We're saying, okay, maybe we'll get back to just, raising crops and different things like that. So I think there's always a way that God can pull things out. And I think we have to allow him that ability. But when we jump ship or we become the Messiah, you either jump ship or become the Messiah.
Yeah.
And one or the other, it's a losing battle.
You got to remember that, when our Lord's, from all eternity, but specifically when our Lord looks at, Simon and says, blessed are you, Simon, son of John, I change your name to Peter, He knew at that moment, as he did from all eternity, but specifically, there he's like, laying out the formula for the church. What, are you going to say that God, infinite, omniscient God, didn't know that we were going to be at this point in history in the church? Of course he did.
Upon this rock and the gates of hell shall not prevail.
That's it.
When you start saying they will, you're going against our Lord's own statement.
I do want to add a little thing, if I can, right here, and I think we have a picture of this. I came across this book very recently, as a matter of fact, down when we were at the Bringing America Back to Life conference this past weekend. It's produced by the TFP, great faithful Catholics. They're TFP's, the Tradition, Family, and Property. And they wrote this book, I Have Weathered Other Storms. It's tremendous. It talks about, if you go through the table of contents even, it goes through all of the, all the various crises that the church has gone through in 2,000 years. And look, we've had the Babylonian papacy, the Avignon papacy, the Western Schism, the Eastern Schism, the Medici popes, the Borgia popes, the Renaissance popes, all of these things, the collapse of the church here and there and everything, all of it. This is not our first storm. I have weathered other storms. You can get this at TFP, Tradition, Family, and Property. Go look them up on their website. It's really, the subtitle, A Response to the Scandals and Democratic Reforms That Threaten the Catholic Church. They do threaten the church, absolutely, but they do not threaten her existence.
One of the other things I'd like to say also, that you can't change math. You can't change truth. You can be in a math class, hey, you got to listen to that teacher. I think he just said 2 + 2 is 5.
Yeah.
I don't have to microanalyze everything that's being said by Pope Francis, because of the fact I have to assume he's leading the church down the path, and if he's not, that's on him. But we had 2,000 years of this path being blazed.
Right.
Stay on the path.
Stay on the path.
What's the big deal?
Don't ever leave the church, either for heresy or for schism. Stay in the church and fight. That is our charge.
Amen.
Own personal holiness and stay in the church and fight. I'm going to wrap up here with a prayer, concluding our special here on Pope Francis' papacy, 10 years. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, Vita Dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus exules filiae Eve. Ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes in hac lacrimarum vale. Ei ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
For everybody here at Church Militant, and of course Brad, compatriot up here, stay in the church. Thank you very much for tuning in. And please share this program with many of your friends. This is a friends and family. It's important that the message get out and be completely understood. There's much more to this story than just the man who happens to be the Pope. God love you all.